new day. Silicone is cured. This thing weighs 120 pounds. Whew. My goodness. So many windings and magnets, and the aluminum case probably helps keep it light, but wow, it is a hefty motor. Let's have a close look. Here's our coupler, right? This coupler is gonna fit right here beautifully, but look how beautiful this plate is. I cannot get enough of that finish. It just makes me smile every time. This is the most important thing. This is a spacer ring, just like when you're installing a camshaft on the B30 engine down there. You wanna have a thrust washer behind that because the ring must be installed on the shaft prior to installing the coupler. Failure to do so will cause improper spacing for final mounting and fitment. Okay, so that's gonna go on first, and that'll fit all the way up in there on the bearing. And then we'll end up putting this little guy, which is our little keyway, slides into here. We'll tap it into place, make sure it's nice, flat, and straight. Heat this guy up to somewhere between 350 to 600 degrees, and it will get brown because it's the oil and the finish here that start to burn, and then it'll be the right temperature for us to mount it. And then ideally we want this to be a slip-on finish, because if it's on there and we're having to hammer it, we're essentially putting a lot of stress on the bearings and the magnets, and we don't want to have to do that. So we will end up protecting our windings, protecting our investment, this motor, by not hammering it, just heating this a lot. And it seems like a lot of people got it on the second time by heating it more than they thought they needed. So we'll end up doing that. A heat plate, not necessarily gonna work here. So we're gonna go ahead and buy a propane torch, and then it should slide into place very easily. A little bit of tapping, but hopefully no hammering required. That would be ideal. You have a zero tolerance fit, which means it kind of feels like it wants to start here. And in theory, you could use that threaded surface on the inside, put a long bolt in there, and kind of like squeeze it in inch by inch. But the heating up temperature, heating it up to the 600 degrees is what's recommended by EV West. So we'll go ahead and do it that way. So yeah, it'll start to brown, the oil burns, slips on, and then the next important step, take some compressed air, immediately cool it down, because you don't want that heat transfer from the 600 degrees here to go into the windings of the motor. We want to protect our baby. Propane is available. It's 15 bucks for a can. That's great, but the torch head is $50. Ordered one on Amazon, but I'm feeling impatient. I watched a guy do it on YouTube just now with a heat gun. So I'm gonna take my 1500 watt heat gun here, which is speed 2. Speed 1 is like 700 watts. Hold my coupler in my hands with the gloves, and when we snap this on, we wanna hear a clink as it hits the back. This is the first thing to go. It's a very tight fit here. Boom, the way up in the end. Oh, this actually clicks in very nicely. Also took 1000 grit sandpaper. Really did a quick work of the rust there. So let's get the heat gun going.
Now when I'm shooting it into the inner part of this coupler, it kind of channels the heat into my palm. So let's see if it'll go. Remember, listen for that noise. Bang, it's on there. So I'm gonna hold it there. I'll just hold it there for, a bit, let it cool down, make sure it cools down and is held in place. And it slid on real easy, so I had it plenty hot. So, but it's not a big deal. It's pretty easy to do.
Maybe this time. Yes. Light tapping, making sure it's seated. Keep seated and cooling. Looks like it kind of sticks out more than it should, but I'm gonna check with measuring our second H9 exactly how deep that coupler is supposed to go. I felt it bottom out, but yeah, you can't really be positive, right? By the appearances, it looks like it should have gone through to the front lip, but it did not. So let's get the measuring out. Ideally, an unlimited supply of compressed air is the way to go with cooling this. What I was doing was using the cans. The can would start to freeze, I would hold it with my hand, and when it got to a tolerable temperature here, I would just use my cold hand and then recharge the can. Our adapter plate here, this is what $1,300 will get you. There you go. Is essentially mimicking the side of the engine, the back side of the engine, and we have a magic number that we want to arrive at when it comes to the spacing of all of our components. Setback, these threads are a little too long. It's long by about 3 threads on each of these bolts. The green line here is where they come out of this piece when they're flush and fully in. And yeah, I've got to cut about 3 of those. It's not exactly hub-centric. Look at that. But that's a bummer. Look at how much run out there is with this not hub-centric flywheel center. That is not acceptable. That's going to become a vibration at, 4,000 RPM. Okay, let's go ahead and remove this. That's got to be it for tonight. I'm pooped. It's 1 a.m. Let's go. Neighbors are probably upset because of all of this grinding. So that magic number that we were trying to get bolted up here is 11.3, but check out how far it sits now when it's all bolted up to the coupler. The coupler determines the distance. We're sitting at about 14.8, 14.7 was the measurement I got all around here. So what does that number actually mean? That means that with this all bolted up, it's about a 3 millimeter difference. And what that means is that this is actually going to sit 3 millimeters further up here. And it won't be an issue if there is more than that available adjustment on this piece, because we don't want to have it sitting so far back that with this all the way back, there's no gap on it. There's a spec in the Volvo book about how much clutch free play you should have, and that is the distance that this fork travels before it engages with the teeth, the clutch pressure plate, the splines actually. So if it's got enough wiggle room in there, it should be okay. But we want to really be sure of that, because while we're remachining this coupler, that would be the thing to correct this distance by actually shaving this down 3 millimeters. Boom, boom. The next thing I'm going to check, it's going to be a lot of wrenching and hauling and moving heavy bits around. I'm going to try to mate these two and put some bolts in there because I want to check for clearance on everything before getting this sent down in case there's something I need to adjust with this plate here. That's going to be a big job. But I'm kind of inclined to leave it on there because it won't make much of a performance difference. It's really marginal based on research from other YouTube channels that I've seen with lightened flywheels, performance flywheels, etc. And it could be useful for coasting because it really controls a bit of the wind up and wind down times of the motor, but it has kind of also a negligible effect on power consumption during those times versus the other light flywheels and coasting, regen braking. So no big deal on that. I am going to keep the ring gear unless we need to really remove it, but then again, the whole purpose of this car, this whole conversion, is to kind of keep as much of the Volvo stuff as you can for simplicity, ease of use, and any sort of like going back to gas engine in the future. Because let's say we live in a world in which, I don't know, this car becomes $1 million car. You're probably going to want to have the option to convert it back to original. It's not really the case here, so we don't need to worry about that. But let's get them together. I couldn't get them mated on the bench, probably because the pilot bearing's out and the clutch has a little wander to it. I don't know. It was tricky. I don't have a hoist there, so I'm gonna try plan B. Dropping it from the top down, that should be a little bit easier, but then it's gonna be really impossible to move this around. So I'll do all my checks here. Fingers crossed. Oh boy. There's no pilot bearing installed, but the coupler's installed, the clutch, the input shaft, and the transmission. Feels like it's bottoming out on something. Look at the size of our gap all around here. It's no good. Gonna have to make some serious adjustments to that coupler to get these amounts just right. Good news is there is play on the clutch, a fair amount. So there's that much that, you know, we can shrink it down, but it just seems like it's the input shaft is bottoming out inside of the coupler here. Let's get another view. Okay, here's the view from the top. Everything is pretty happy here. We got it centered in the middle with the clutch alignment tool, even though there's no pilot bearing, but that gives it more and more space for the input shaft. But it looks like the input shaft is butting up with the front shaft of the HyPer9. So something is incorrect in the measurement for all of these depths. Darn. Let's see what we got to figure that out. Redo the coupler, I think. But the outer piece seems to fit up very nicely and it lines up well. And there's no interference yet. The depth from the inside of the HyPer9 all the way, you know, bottoming out to the clutch shaft splines is 72.7. The input shaft, so we'll call it 73. The input shaft from here to this metal end is 82. So it's like 9 millimeters difference. That means this is 9 millimeters too long. So what are our solutions here? Well, we could extend the backside of the coupler 9 millimeters, which will push it forward maybe 10 or 11 to be safe. And that will bring the entire clutch assembly further in. You remember we had a lot of free play here, so it seems like there's a good amount of wiggle room for this to make a nice adjustment, which means we can play with different clutch depths, because this clutch, one of the kits, this is the one that was in Ivy, is like 10 millimeters skinnier than the other clutch, and that difference is why this needs to be readjusted every time you change your clutch, because manufacturer differences, etc. You know, even the shape of that, largely the same, but so many differences. Spring, rivets, the diameter should match, the splines should match, but everything else is manufacturer specific. This is just part of the journey, I guess. I think the good news also is we can reuse our backing plate. We just got to get that flywheel forward more. Now, I'm a little confused with all these numbers. I've taken a lot of measurements and photos. I'm going to send them all to EV West. They said bring it all back and we will remeasure and make sure it's all mated and good to go, which is good because I don't want to have to reheat the coupler or trying to extract it with some sort of puller in the middle. That could be 1 or 2 hour headache, but the guys there at the shop should have very little trouble with that. We're getting some ideas of how tricky this can be because the measurements really matter. This is the entire heart of the operation. This is where the EV system mates with the Volvo system, and nowhere else really does it integrate so much. Like maybe the battery, but that's really just 2 wires sending voltage from a 140 volt system down to a 12 volt system. The rest is all kind of figured out mechanically here, and we gotta get it perfect. So trial and error. The B30, it's a bigger transmission, bigger engine, bigger all of that, so it's new territory for the guys. Otherwise, if we had a B20 car like an Amazon or something else, I think they would have figured it out by now. Thanks for watching. It's a journey, and you know, it's just another step on the way. But we're making progress because everything that we do on this car is going to be doubled there for Ivy, and it should be a much faster build. Anyway, enough rambling. I'll see you guys later. If it's too thin, then we can just take more metal away.
Too big.
Ah, okay, so we need to expand that step.
Yeah.
So you could cut the step to a smaller diameter,
Yes.
and then put a thicker spacer on there. Yeah,
Yes.
that's another
Instead
option.
of machining a whole another $600 coupler.
Yeah.
Well, it's attached. But it looks kind of nice, huh? EV parts, EV parts, EV parts. Giant Tesla motor, EV parts, wiring. Sample cart. This is basically what I'll end up doing. At first, there's your pedals. Nice. Oh, I need a pigtail. Boxes are loaded up for all my batteries, and now it's time to take them home. We're living in 100-degree heat again. It's the end of August. We're about to enter September. Oh, we love it here. We love it. Electric cars, battery boxes.
This now
Good.
actually sits and it's
Oh, that's beautiful.
hub centric now in there.
Yep.
Both this and this should be tight in there.
Okay.
And then motors are drilled out, so the shaft will fit in there. This, now your stock pilot bearing wouldn't work in there because these were oversized.
I see.
So I make the brass bushing and I made this fit. I have your training over here, I'll show you. This should fit whenever we put it all together. I mean, we didn't press this on, but
Right.
when we made everything together, this bushing will fit over that enough to where
Oh, so there's a little clearance.
deep enough, yeah. So you should, because if you look in there, it protrudes,
Okay.
but that's what's gonna protrude into here.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
in theory, it should all go together fine. And we took this and made this up to it, made sure it clears, everything spins. This sits flat against this.
You did a full assembly with the clutch and everything, so that we know that they'll bolt up without any gap?
Yeah, so on the first motor,
Yeah.
I did that. I had everything set together, bolted it together. I put like 3 bolts in there so it's sealed.
Yeah,
So
okay.
on this one, I'm like, just drill it the same depth as that.
That should
and it'll
match.
be
Yeah,
fine.
these transmissions are identical.
Have any testers in stock?
Okay.
They started charging us separately for them and they never shipped them in our last.
I remember that.
This is amazing. Look at this. Oh, wow. Huge contactors, too. Oh, this is gonna be so cool. Perfect. It's not mating again. It's got a 1/4 inch gap. I'm gonna try a few things. I've pulled it out twice and you're in the company of some legends here, huh? Look at you. All right, first possible solution. Step this up so that it's actually gonna sit on top of this rather than here. And that should get us that extra 10 millimeters that we need. Fingers crossing. 20 millimeters. So now it's gonna sit not there, but here on the edge. A little bit like that. Nice. Should be a little self-clearancing too, but it's gonna be nice and greased up when it's all said and done. I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Today, at least off, I'll try to pop that brass bushing out, make a new brass bushing in there, and just leave it undersized, and you can let me know. Actually, I'll bore it out to the 20 mil, basically put it back to how this one's getting.
High marks to the entire EBOS team, because every time I'm here for something, they've been very good to me. So thank you to Merritt and Michael for making sure that everything is set up right and correctly. I can't wait to get home and find 2 more of these boots so that I can complete Sauron's glove and have my cosplay all ready to go. So, see you at home. I expected it to be a lot more time spent on this, but they took care of me right away, so that was awesome. Thanks, EP West. Let's see how it goes. New coupler is on, and it got stuck a few times because I didn't heat it enough. I only got it to like 250 to 300 degrees. I really want 350 to 400. The way you know is that the oil starts to brown right there on the shaft. And then I had a little oil drip going from my oiler, and that's how I knew once it started smoking, okay, it's go time. And like I said, so much faster with this than with this. I use this because I want it to be more consistent and around, and I felt like that was gonna be too centralized, but honestly, I was just talking myself out of it, so let's do this. I also kept an eye on my brass bushing because I was a little concerned, like maybe this would melt, but the temperature of this part never got above 300. So I think the brass is good there to like maybe 400 before it starts to distort a little bit. I think, maybe even more. What does the internet have to say? I'm able to spin it. We're in 4th gear, so it's 1-to-1 drive. As I spin this, it spins that. Looking pretty good. I think it's finally ready to get put into this car. All right. Phew. We are bolted up. Woo! Nice. Can't really tell, but it's clearing really good. Moving on.